Hello, everyone. My name is Eva, and I come from Zagreb, Croatia. And the reason why I'm here is because the organizers wanted to include one of Interpret Europe's trainers into this overall workshop. And I hope that this session is going to be useful, maybe give you a different perspective. I really hope that I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that other lecturers have mentioned, although I'm sure it's going to be pretty much different. If I'm speaking too fast, please let me know if you don't have the time to translate. I'm going to try to be slower. So let's just share the presentation right away, and feel free to ask any questions even along our way. After all, one of the main, oh, just a second. Yes. Okay, that was my email. Sorry. Oh, wait. Just a second. I'm just sharing full screen. Sorry. This should be it. Great. There. Okay, I hope that you can see it normally. There's the whole screen. Perfect. So yes, please let me know if you have any questions, even as I'm talking, because one of the principles of interpretation is engagement. So it would be nice if this would be engaging as well, and not just a lecture. So the topic that I'm going to talk about precisely is going to be practical aspects of interpretation of living heritage. And I'm actually really comfortable to talk about something like that because I am a practitioner. I personally run several projects that are like entrepreneurial projects based on heritage tourism, more precisely. But I'm also collaborated as an author, as a consultant for a lot of institutions, from destination management to museums, interpretation centers, nature parks. So I really am into communicating with the audience and the visitors and presenting heritage in the way that's most understandable to them. And I also always try to find some new innovative approaches. So I hope that there's going to be at least an idea or two for you as well, for something that you might consider implementing. This is a little table of content, just an overview of what you might expect today throughout this lecture. So I wanted to start with some information about Interpret Europe, as today I'm coming as a representative or trainer and member of that organization. This is the biggest European association for heritage interpretation. So I'm actually representing heritage interpretation as a branch today. And then after a short presentation of what does Interpret Europe do and how can it help you get into heritage interpretation field, we're going to define heritage interpretation again with some points pointing to the details that might help us in our work. Interpretive tools and methods, that's another topic that we're going to cover, and you're going to see from this that interpretation is really something like a dance between abstract and very concrete. And that's great news, because while the abstract part is sometimes really difficult to understand and really put in use, the concrete parts and tools are, on the other hand, very easy, and you can start using them tomorrow if you already haven't used them in your work before. Then community involvement. I know that throughout these sessions, throughout the overall workshop, You've been hearing about communities over and over again, and I'm sure that all of you are aware that that's something that you can't put out of your daily work if you want to safeguard heritage. But I'm going to give another perspective from heritage interpretation point of view. And this time we are not really going to go through some major examples, but rather through some small examples, because no matter how small the project is, community involvement shouldn't be put aside. Yes, then there are going to be examples, quick ideas of maybe new projects, how to put all of this in use. There's going to be some word about promotion as well from your surveys. I noticed that some of you are really interested in that, like how to get the word to the possible audience. So we are going to cover that as well. And this brings us to the online communities, which is an aspect that is growing, and another thing that we can't really live without. Anyone who wants to get some audience or some visitors or community members to work, they have to find the way. We have to find a way to share information, and that way can exist online. And then finally, a little wrap up and another space for discussion. But again, if you have any questions along our way, just let me know. So let me just share a few words about Interpret Europe. Now, it's a pretty young organization from 2010, but the idea behind it is a bit older. It was inspired by other organizations, more precisely the biggest organization in heritage interpretation, and that's American National Association for Interpretation, known for the abbreviation NAI, right? So because in Europe, the approach is a bit different. There was a need to start a different organization. And what's particularly good about this organization, just like heritage interpretation as a field, is that it's a link, a network of different disciplines. So it's an interdisciplinary approach and organization to start with. And isn't that what we're talking about when we're talking about new ways of presenting heritage as a must? Professionals working together with common people. That's the core of this organization, because the members are both institutional, such as universities, research centers of all sorts, associations, museums, and then there are a lot of individual members who come from different fields, from tourism to nature preservation, and so on. The mission of Interpret Europe, as you can see, is empowering all who inspire meaningful connections with Europe's natural and cultural heritage to shape our common future. And this word meaningful, I know that it seems a bit maybe a bit too much, but a deeper meaning is the core of heritage interpretation, as I'm going to talk about a little more later on. And then the vision is that by 2030, so that's just 8 years, heritage interpretation will be established as the generally accepted and professional approach to creating public understanding and appreciation of natural and cultural heritage throughout Europe. Which means that if there's anyone among you who doesn't really think that heritage interpretation should be considered at all, well, that's perfectly fine, but there shouldn't be anyone by 2030 if Interpret Europe manages to follow its vision and fulfill it. Really, things are changing in the world of institutions, including museums. I'm sure that most of you are aware that that the public was often kind of frightened up until recently of many institutions, especially museums and archives and libraries. So institutions that have the task to preserve heritage. But this is changing. They are opening up more and more, and this little link that can help them come closer to public is precisely heritage interpretation. So it's perfectly normal that we are all, when we enter different communities, especially institutions, we are perfectly aware that sometimes there are rejections. There's some, people are not really always comfortable with the idea of this new discipline that is now interfering with some traditional ways of exhibiting and presenting heritage. But since this is, but I'm sure that since most of you are working with living heritage, or at least this conference, this set of sessions is about living heritage, then you know that without people, there's just no way to safeguard it, right? And then the goals of the organization. First of all, it's to grow a membership that supports and is supported by the association. Well, as one of the members, I started really out of curiosity. I joined this because I thought that maybe there are better ways to act in tourism, because I started in tourism, but all of my products are obviously inspired by local heritage. So I thought that maybe there was a way to make it more meaningful, to be more careful and observant when it comes to local heritage and the communities that the products are based in. More precisely, I work, that's my biggest project, a set of tours called Secret Zagreb. So they are all storytelling themed tours. Some of them are gamified, pretty creative, but they are all based on different themes from local history. And I started working towards becoming pretty much a mainstream product. And then I realized that this is not what I wanted in the beginning, and that I should probably find better ways to be respectful and actually help preserve or help maintain some old stories, some old history through my tours, and not just to please the tourists, which is a trap that many of tourism products, but also anyone who comes into connection with the audience and visitors, that's a trap that we can fall into. So I got a lot of support from Interpret Europe. We are really able to interact, to bring ideas to the table, all of us, even an individual member. Of course, the ideas are treated with carefully. So it's not every idea is in accordance with Interpret Europe's goal. The organization is very careful about that, about maintaining the status of heritage interpretation and building it. But it's really been useful on a professional level for me to become a member and to get involved into the work of organization. So I can really say that from my own point of view as well, that this goal is being fulfilled. And then, as you can see, the other goal is very similar to what I showed you on the previous page. See the vision, if you remember. So the goal is to anchor heritage interpretation at European and national levels. In Croatia, my home country, this is actually really working out well. Croatia, this is something really recognized in Croatia. There's a whole bunch of interpretation centers that are being opened up. Museums are turning into more interpretive. They are turning to a more interpretive approach when they are organizing exhibitions. There's a lot of reaching out to communities on behalf of the nature parks and museums. Even some tourism destinations are seeing the exit from the massive tourism in heritage interpretation and the quality and raising the quality standards of the destination. So this is on national level in my home country actually being fulfilled. And I wanted to show this picture just to show you that I always practice what I speak. As a trainer, I worked for a little town in Istria, and then later, after the training, we all organized an interpretive walk together. These are all of my students back then, and that's me. So we had this really great event, which was greeted by the locals, where we went through this little town of Shishan that you've probably never heard of, but it hides a lot of little corners worth and stories worth telling. So it's a nice result of a training, and that's what we try to do in Interpret Europe. We try to really put heritage interpretation in use. And this is the final thing that I'm going to tell you about Interpret Europe, their training program. This is a list of courses on the left that Interpret Europe has developed and offers. Well, the most tested one is Certified Interpretive Guide training, which was a part of several international projects, one after another. They kept testing it, developing it, and now for years they've been running it, and it still keeps being improved, but it's, according to many participants in the training, that's one of the most transformative trainings they took. Those are their quotes. Really, it's a very common quote of a survey after the training, and people really start understanding how to bring heritage closer to people after their training. So these other trainings, the writer, the planner, hosts, those are people in destination who could come in contact with visitors, like I don't know, people who work in the tourism office, or people who produce souvenirs, or who rent places, or even run bars and cafes and restaurants, or fishermen, for example, people who are just there, a living heritage examples of humans. So all of them could have a certain use of interpretive hosting. But I'm really a fan of Certified Interpretive Guide. That's the training that actually started turning me in a professional in this field. So I'm a real fan, and I would recommend you, if you ever get the chance, to try it. But if you don't, let me just share something in the chat with you. Just a little thing, some materials that you could maybe consult. These are the materials of Interpret Europe's training, and this is, I mean, Interpret Europe organizes different researches, and this is what you could try, read, consult to learn more about the approach. And this here, this second link is the manual that's used for the training, and it's really difficult to understand it if you don't really follow the training, but it can be a good start, and maybe even something. Oh, Miglena, can you maybe say the question? Miglena, I can see that you rose your hand. Okay, feel free to interrupt me, just not all at the same time. So yes, that's something that you can consult. I can maybe assume that the question could be, is there a version in Bulgarian? Not that I'm aware of. but you can also see if there is a representative for your country. In Interpret Europe, you can ask any additional questions. But let's cut the long story short and go back to presentation. Wait a second, share. Okay, you can see it again, right? Let me just do this. Great. And now let's go straight back to the beginning of heritage interpretation. Now, maybe this is going to come as a surprise to some of you, because we are now in a museum world, in cultural heritage, but you know, heritage interpretation was actually developed in the United States as a branch. In nature, it was inspired by natural heritage, but then again, this is not a big surprise. As we already mentioned, Europe has traditional ways to preserve heritage, and they work pretty well. Museums are one of those institutions. And then in the United States, as everything was new, they still say that everything is new, as if nothing had ever existed before. Well, there were several thinkers, I'd call them, or maybe philosophers, even poets in a way, who started discussing nature philosophically, and that actually led to the development of the theory of heritage interpretation. So just like in Europe in the 19th century, all the philosophers and the poets, they gathered in you know, Parisian bars and drank absinthe probably, and maybe too much, and had their conversations. Well, as a role model, they were this kind of gatherings were taken to America as well. And then a group of poets or thinkers gathered, and they started discussing how when you go into nature, if you're there long enough, you could actually reach the secrets of the nature. And it sounds funny, but this is something that I don't know, people today, especially people who like hikers and people who love to spend time in the nature, they can maybe understand and relate to that a little bit. When you're in nature long enough, all by yourself, you do start getting some feelings and some deep thoughts that could maybe bring you to some higher truth. I don't know, but that's what they agreed on. They even published a little book of essays called Nature. And some of the first thinkers, and we like to call them like fathers or grandfathers of heritage interpretations, are Henry Tsuroi. He was, for example, famous for living in a cabin for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, and just exploring the world around him. And it sounds a bit romantic, but to be fair, that cabin was not really in the middle of a forest, as people like to imagine. It was very close to Boston, and he actually, they used to bring him food each day. He had some neighbors nearby, so it wasn't really the genuine experience in the nature, but it's considered to be a big thinking book, And if any one of you studied English literature, you have probably came across the works of Tsuroi. Then Enos Mills, he was like the first prominent tour guide in nature. And in his book, Adventures of a Tour Guide, he wrote some phrases that even today are considered to be anyone who has ever been in contact with visitors and guided them through, whether it's a city, an exhibition, anything. Anyone can relate easily to that. Let's just see what's in chat. Speak slower. Okay, sorry. I'm going to try. Thank you. So anyone who was ever in contact with visitors, they will understand his ideas about tour guide. So it's kind of like a little manual for tour guides from the late 19th century, really. And he says, for example, that a tour guide is a mom and dad and clown and photographer. You probably all know that. I'm sure that if you had contact with guests, that you also had to help them in many different ways. Then, sorry, I'm just checking the messages. Then he also says this thing, I don't know if you will like it, that it's better to know one tree, to really get to know one tree and become friends with it, than know the names of the whole of 1,000 species. I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's something that is also a basis of heritage interpretation, to find out what is special about one specimen, and that will help people understand the value of the whole bunch. For instance, if you're standing in an olive orchard, so you're surrounded by olive trees, and you just pick out one tree and start explaining to your audience everything this tree passed through. Like each of the bumps on the tree is some kind of a mark, a scar. It shows you how long it has been here. You can explain how many families did this tree feed with its golden oil. Just one tree, and you spend a few minutes on that one tree. People start appreciating the tree. They can understand it, they can feel it, touch it. And then when they turn around, when they see that they are surrounded with 100 of similar examples, and each of them has a story of their own, that's when they are going to understand fully that they are immersed in a wealth, a treasure, that they are surrounded by treasure. So usually in interpretation, it's better to talk about one species and one object, one tradition, and then try to make people understand that they are surrounded by wealth, and that they just will never be able to know everything about everything. They just have to appreciate the abundance. And let's get back to the fathers of interpretation. This man on the picture, John Muir, they also call him John of the Mountains, because this man truly lived in the mountains. He truly built a cabin, a little house made out of wood in the forest above a creek, because he loved the sound of the water so much that he decided to build a house above the creek. He couldn't sleep without it. Crazy, right? Well, he writes down this famous sentence where he uses the word interpretation as translation. I'll interpret the rocks, learn the language of flood, storm, and the avalanche. I'll acquaint myself with the glaciers and wild gardens, and get as near the heart of the world as I can. And now he's talking about rocks, huge rocks of Yellowstone, and the glaciers. So these are massive nature phenomena, right? So maybe it's easier to understand that sentence in that manner. But we are also trying to do that as interpreters. We are also trying to get to the heart of the things and then share it with the audience. And yes, the word interpretation that he uses here is actually means explain, translate. And that's the role of heritage interpretation, to translate the knowledge of the experts and objects and traditions to common people, or at least general public? Well, Freeman Tilden is the man who is considered to be the true father of interpretation. Now, there are several big organizations for heritage interpretation in the world, but each and every one of them has their theories, their definitions of heritage interpretation based on this old definition from 1957. Now, that was the year when Freeman Tilden published his book, Interpreting Our Heritage. And he was actually hired by national parks. They hired him to observe the work of rangers. And then he was supposed to give some guidelines, some inputs on their work, and maybe help them work better. So this is his definition. Heritage interpretation is an educational activity which aims to reveal meanings and relationships through the use of original objects by first-hand experience and by illustrative media, rather than simply to communicate factual information. So, I mean, it's a very long and maybe hard to comprehend definition, but let's just split it into a few details just to see what's the most important part of it. It's just because many people, when they hear the word heritage interpretation, they sometimes think that it's some kind of a trivialization of information, but it's not. It's just a way to help a normal grown person understand better, because whenever they come to our institutions, when they come into a museum, of course, a museum is a place where they learn, but it's also a place where they came in their free time. They didn't come to get a university lecture. They just don't have the patience for that. I'm sure that you are all aware of that. And even if we're not aware of that, let's put ourselves into visitors' shoes when we come as a visitor to any place. No matter how interested we are, we often lack patience to read the long tables, informations, books, to listen to difficult expert language of audio guides. We just don't have the patience, even if we're interested, because it's our free time, our leisure time, and it's hard to insert an educational activity into such time. But this is an educational activity in the best possible way. In fact, you can offer to an adult person in the free time. So educational activity that reveals meanings. See, that's the word again. I already mentioned the word meanings and meaningful. Oh, thank you, Christinka. It would be a treasure if many interpreters, if people would take an interpretive approach, because general audience would probably understand better the value of the heritage that surrounds us. And relationships. So to reveal meanings and relationships, this word relationships, think about it as a connection between the interpreter and anything he presents, but also try to find relationships between the world that you're presenting and the world of your visitor. Try to find the connection, and you can do it in a simple way. Imagine a person being in New York, in Central Park in New York, and then ask him if he has a park in his hometown. If there's no park, maybe there's a tree that people come to. If it's a small town, just a tree, a little piece of nature where people come and gather. Try to make them create similarities and links in their head between where you are right now and the heritage that you're presenting and something they already know. Because when they feel they know something, when they make this link in their mind, they will immediately create an emotional connection. It's very simple, really. All you have to do is think about what could be similar, what kind of a known experience is similar in the world of your visitor and this tradition or place that we're presenting. The use of original objects is very important, although illustrative media can help. But original objects are really important because people, if they don't see something, they will often not believe it truly. Maybe it happened to you that you were listening to someone and he said something which was really curious and unbelievable, and you didn't really believe it. You went to Google and checked it. If that happens to you, then you can understand that the power of the original object and something that can actually help you prove what you're saying. Also, I have personally visited once an exhibition where the major piece was on loan in a different museum. So the major exhibit, a painting, wasn't there. And the guide, he still stood there in front of an empty wall, and for half an hour, he was talking about the painting that wasn't there. There was a little photograph, but it wasn't a real painting. And we just didn't care as a group. We didn't care. We couldn't connect. There wasn't the original object in front of us. So in interpretation, it's better, that's the advice, to find a different way, to find something else you're going to talk about, than to stick to something that's not there and people just have a hard time connecting. First-hand experience. I think this is especially important in living heritage because all sorts of workshops, or at least partial workshops where people will get a chance to try out something for themselves, learn something, maybe share it on, then this is something that can be very fulfilling. And then this last part could be a bit misleading when you read it at first. It just says, rather than simply to communicate factual information. But factual information is still the basis of any education. This is still here. But instead of saying, this building was first mentioned in 1242, but back then it was built in this style, we have these documents. So instead of giving very short, concrete, and ununderstandable facts, we actually give a bigger story. We use more words to share and more examples to share what is actually a simple fact. We widen the facts. And because of that, we unfortunately for anyone who really loves to share their knowledge, we don't really have the time to share everything we know. We just don't. So we have to choose. We have to choose what do we really want to communicate in the way to make people understand the overall fact. So I'm really not aware whether the book Interpreting Our Heritage by Freeman Tilden is translated to Bulgarian. I know that it's not translated to Croatian, but there are different translations available online as an ebook. So if any one of you talks another bigger European language, I'm sure that you're not going to have trouble getting access to this book. It's just very simple. It's simple, and all there is, all there is in the book is that definition that I mentioned, and these 6 principles. Really, that's the whole book. It's just that they are explained in more words. So these are the principles of heritage interpretation. I'm not going to go deep into them, but I bolded these words that could be something like a little memory for you, and you could maybe remember what are the most important things in heritage interpretation. So see, the first principle is any interpretation that does not somehow relate what is being displayed or described to something within the personality or experience of the visitors will be sterile. So people will just not react to it. So relation, connection, if you find that, if you help people understand what could this mean, like, for example, saying that the pond is the home to a frog, okay? So the pond is the home to a frog. As soon as you use this word home, a person will start thinking somewhere in the back of their mind, oh, wait, I have a home too. This means something. And just the use of this simple word, home, will form a small connection. Just that. You understand now, what does the pond mean to a frog? What does the forest mean to a fox, right? Then the second, information is not interpretation. Information, if you have an informative text with nothing but information, only years and data, then it's not interpretation. Interpretation is revelation based upon information. Okay, just to simplify this, whenever you feel this moment when you're learning about something, whether you're in a museum, on an interpretation site, anything, if you have this moment when you think, oh, really? Oh, wow. Aha, it's very simple, but this moment is the true moment of learning. And if you can create those moments for your visitors, then each time you create such a moment, they will learn, because these are the things that you will always remember. It's very simple and kind of trivial, but that's really how things work. Then interpretation is an art. Well, that's what we like to believe, everyone who is into interpretation, that interpretation is an art. But then again, any art is in some degree teachable, which is great, because if you're not a talented artist, you can still learn and at least become a master, if not a true artist, which is pretty good, right? Then the chief aim of interpretation is not instruction, it's provocation. Listen, that's not provocation in the sense that we want to make anyone angry, not in that sense. Provocation of thinking, we want to make people think deeper about whatever we're presenting. Interpretation should aim to present a whole rather than a part, and must address itself to the whole man rather than any phase. Now, this is a bit difficult to grasp on in the beginning, but let's just say that even if we are creating a themed product, even if we are presenting just a part of a local heritage, we still want people to feel like they know everything about it now. I mean, we don't want to mislead them. They will understand there's a lot more to learn, but they will feel like they understand it as a whole. And this thing about whole man, a whole person, rather than any face, this is, you know, when you have guests in front of you, you don't really know anything about them. You can have your niches, that's true, but you don't really know the experience of the person behind, in front of you. You don't know if they are single or if they are a pair, if they are straight, if they are gay, if they have a family or they don't, if they have education or not. You don't really know that. And you have to make people, you can maybe tell how old are they, but you are not talking to an old man, you are not talking to a student, you are talking to a person. If you can do that, if you can get over all the prejudice that we might have when we're speaking to people, then we are going to make sure that our message is being transmitted. As I said, interpretation is kind of a dance between abstract and concrete, and this fifth principle is kind of abstract. And then the last part, I'm sure that most of you are completely aware that interpretation for children is different than anything else. So children are exception from this whole man. We have to create different programs for children. And okay, just a little bit more theory here. If there's any questions so far, please let me know. I can't see anything in the chat. Great. I mean, I didn't mean that it's great. I would love to have some questions, but I'm glad that things are clear. Now, this picture here is from the interpretive guide. I already shared the link with you in the chat. So that's the manual that follows our trainings in Interpret Europe. And okay, it's something that we usually, in the complete trainings, we usually spend a whole week just explaining this in a way, but I'm trying to be short. Interpret Europe has defined 4 aces of interpretation. Aces as cards, see? This is an old illustration, so please don't kill us for the terrible design. I know it's terrible, but let's just see what are these aces. First of all, this whole structure here is the so-called triangle of interpretation, or interpretive triangle. The whole theory of interpretation is based on interpretation as educational activity and also a sort of a communication method. So in this case, we are imagining, the normal way to imagine things is that the interpreter, which doesn't need to be a person, it can be an interpretive medium like a panel, a mobile app. It can be anything that you use for interpretation. In this case, it's a person. So a person talks to participants. We call them participants because we want to engage people. So instead of, so far I was using the word visitors, guests, audience, but from now on I'm going to start using the word participants because that's how we think of people who are coming to experience a certain heritage phenomenon. Because everything that we present, we call a phenomenon. I know it's a big word, but we really like to point out to the special, unique characteristics of whatever we are presenting. For example, if you want to present a piece of Gothic architecture, then it wouldn't really be very successful and memorable if you start talking about Gothic architecture overall and start proving why is this a Gothic piece. Can you see the pointy details? Can you see the tall windows? And so this is how all the Gothic cathedrals are built. But what the person hears is, this is one out of many Gothic cathedrals. So why am I here? I can go to any other place. In fact, there are better Gothic cathedrals. in the world, and I'm spending my time here in front of one of many. Instead, try to make them realize why this particular church is special. A mention of a Gothic style is okay, but try to focus on what's unique about this thing, and all of a sudden, that particular church will become a phenomenon, something unique, something that they weren't able to see anywhere else. So phenomenon can be anything. It can be a building, it can be a custom, it can be a product of that custom, it can be a nature site, a single tree, an animal, anything really. And instead of interpreter talking just to participants, we are trying, and this is again the abstract part, we are trying the communication to go all the ways, that we are more of facilitators than lecturers, and we are trying to help them connect with the phenomenon. So that's our main role as an interpreter. We are inviting them to observe, to pay attention, to ask questions, to think hard, to come to their own conclusions, to make revelations. That's what we're trying to do. And in this way, they are becoming more engaged with the phenomenon. And the communication runs all the ways, from us to phenomenon, from us to them when we're sharing the information, and also between them and the phenomenon. They are going to be able to experience it. If we manage to do that, that's what we're succeeding. Again, it's a bit abstract, but I'm going to explain it a bit better later on. In between, the thing that connects all of this is what we call a theme. And in Croatian, we also use the word poruka, ideja. I'm just saying, if maybe it's not just theme as tema, because it's not something general, it's theme in the artistic sense. You know how an art piece, a composition, a poem, they all have a certain theme. It's kind of a guideline that leads you in your, that leads the artist in their creation. So that's actually the most important part of interpretation, and very abstract. But I hope that I'm going to be able to clarify it a bit more later on. I'm not sure, maybe you could, some of you could answer whether you have ever been in a contact with the concept of a theme in creation. Okay, someone, Kristinka said that the visitors are often not participants. Okay, that's great. That happens, but are there any attempts to make them participants? It doesn't need to be something big. Sometimes just by changing the text on panels can help them become participants. Only if you help them think instead of just being sponges for information. So did anyone ever hear about this concept of theme in interpretation? Can you maybe write down the answer in chat? Or maybe you could simply put a little thumb up sign if you can press like if you've ever heard of this. Not many people. Okay, then I'm going to explain it a bit more later on, because this is really the core idea of interpretation and the most important ingredient. In fact, in interpretive projects that are structured according to heritage interpretation principles, it even goes as far as that the theme is the only thing that doesn't change. the only thing. So even if you change the phenomenons when you're showing the people around, like in that case when the painting was missing, but if the interpreter follows a certain thought that could be a guideline, he can easily change the whole route even without the missing painting, and the whole experience would feel almost the same for the participant. He would still feel like he knows, he has learned a lot, he understands the importance of the collection. He would still feel that even though the most important art piece is not there. Okay, and the 4 aces are things that help connect this triangle. First of all, we offer paths to deeper meanings. So deeper meanings are connected with a theme. Then we are turning phenomena to experiences, as I told you, by inviting them, by engaging them, by making them think, by using a multi-sensory approach. We are turning the phenomenon into something more tangible, more memorable. We are provoking resonance in participants. They are starting to think, feel, and they start almost interacting with the phenomenon, almost talking to it, communicating in a way. And we foster respect for all heritage. So one of the final goals of any interpreter is to make people appreciate. We don't have the time to share everything that we know about the topic that we're sharing. We don't have that time. We have, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, sometimes half an hour to share something with people. And in that limited time, we have to, I mean, we don't have to, but that's the goal of an interpreter. We have to help them understand the value of heritage that surrounds us. By doing that, we are actually helping them. We are truly building a more sustainable world, I believe, at least, because once that person understands the value of an olive orchard in one part of the world, he's going to go to another country. He's going to drive through fields, okay, not fields, but forests of olive trees. And he's going to remember that feeling that he got when you were talking about that. And he's going to know that this is something very valuable for the people of that region too. He's going to know the value, and he's not going to toss some kind of dirt into that forest that he knows nobody will see, because he's going to have the respect for that. Okay, that's a bit of an idealistic approach. But if we share the value of heritage, if we make people appreciate, instead of try pouring an incredible amount of information in their minds, we can help them, you know, making little switches in their behavior too. Okay, so you can find more about this, find out more about these aces of interpretation in the interpretive guide by Thorsten Ludwig, the link that I shared before. And if anyone maybe joined later on, let me know so I can share the link again. Okay, this is just a little thing that I wanted to ask you. What do we see? Just a bunch of photos, as you can see, from a small town in Croatia called Bakar. That's the name of the town. It's not really a famous tourist destination, but it's growing, and they are actually taking an interpretive approach in their development as a destination. So I'm really fond of them. So let's just check out these photos. Really, what do you see? Wait. I thought that maybe this automated description will tell us. Okay, what do you see here? You're passing through Bakar and you see a dot. Okay, a red dot. And then down there is a different question. How does it make you feel when you see this dot? I mean, you can answer, but you don't have to. Just think about it. I know that when I saw it for the first time, I thought, oh, look, they just put a hiking mark on a wall. Okay, that's strange, but okay. Then look at this. It's a boat and it's sunk. That's a great photo opportunity. That's what I thought. I didn't really think a lot about that. So I just took a photo. I don't know, what do you think when you see a sunk boat? Okay. Then an old machine. That's cool. I like seeing old machines. This is maybe 100-year-old. Look at this. No one uses this anymore. So I'm kind of thrilled. Great. Then what's this? You see something really awkward. And let me just tell you that this is like 10 meters high. So when I first saw it, I thought, what's wrong with these people here? They're jumping from this to the sea? They're crazy. Really, don't do that. I'm not doing that. Or maybe someone among you thinks, oh, I want to try that. But what I thought is that people are crazy here. Then this here is, okay, looks good. Something that the man made, obviously. Dry stone walls. Okay, looks cool. Then this is actually pretty big, like 5 meters or so. So twice as big as a human being. So it looks like some kind of a pretty cool industrial tunnel. Okay. This looks ugly. It actually spoils the picture. This last one in the last row. Oh, look, starfish. That's cute. And this, I don't know what you think you're seeing. Most of the people would say, oh, it's a sunset. That's nice. And we had a nice walk. We saw some nice sights, but we don't know anything about them. We created some of our own conclusions. It doesn't really mean a thing. We maybe felt something, but that's about it. I'm going to come back to this. I just wanted to analyze it a little bit, and then we are going to come back to it. Oh, let's see the chat. Zales, okay. Okay, I can understand what a zales is. And we also say zalazak, so that's nice. If someone can, so you're sending direct messages to me, and I would also be happy if you would send me, if you just share this with everyone, because I received this some messages as a direct message. So one of the answers is vid rabotilinica za naldrava. Okay. All these make me curious, said someone. That's nice. Great. I can maybe just put the answers in the chat so you don't see who put them. If you don't want to, wait a second. If you don't want to make them public, that's also perfectly fine. I'm going to share them and maybe someone can translate it to me. So now you all see it in the chat. Okay, let's see. I don't know, why are you not translating? I hope it's not something terrible, but okay. Then another little quote by Freeman Tilden that you can also find in his famous book, Interpreting Our Heritage, is just a cute thought that Interpretation should reveal the larger truth behind any topic or fact. Again, unlike that long definition, this one is much more abstract. It talks about larger truth. And just remember this, larger truth, deeper meaning, theme, they are all connected and they are kind of the core of heritage interpretation. What does that mean? So instead of asking, what do we see? Why don't we ask, what does this mean really? So once I learned some more about Bakar, old, abandoned, modest, and not so interesting. You're right. That's actually something that a lot of people would think. But let me just share a few information. Now, I found out that this actually means that this is the zero, what's the word? Zero sea level, and that the entire country of Croatia, it's measured from this particular point in Bakar. The whole country is measured from this, as you said, old, abandoned, and modest little town, right? Just sorry. Wait, why did this? Sorry, no, back. Sorry. Here. Then, what about this boat? Actually, there is this really notorious and famous Bura wind. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. Bura is the name. It's a wind that comes from the north, from the mountains to the coast. And it actually makes some pretty terrible problems. Like this poor boat got sunk because the man didn't take it in early enough. And this natural Bura wind disaster sunk it. It's that powerful. And this here is an old machine that was used by one of Croatia's greatest inventors, Andrija Mohorovicic, who is considered to be the father of seismology because of his discoveries. So he was a world-known scientist in that field. And he worked in Bakar, and this thing from his time still works. Now this here is not really a facility for jumping, for crazy ski dives. It's actually a remain of traditional fishing, tuna fishing, when they fished for tuna fish by observing when exactly it entered the bay. So the fishermen were actually people who were sitting here on top of the observation desk, just watching to the distance, and then they caught tuna. So it's quite a curiosity, a unique way they use. Then these are indeed stone-dried walls that were founded by Maria Theresia back in 1750s. And they were really abandoned and ruinous until a local association that preserves local heritage decided to rebuild it and rebuild this tradition in the most traditional way. It's a unique landscape, heritage landscape in this region that is now rebuilt. It looks awesome when you look at it from far away. In fact, in the UN's main office, there is a picture of these dry stone walls from Bakar. And this here is an underground railway that was used to transfer goods. It's a tunnel that goes under the water. And when you look at the bay from above, you can only see a little indicator like this that just warns the ships that there is something underneath, like a huge tunnel. It is a remain of industry. This on the left, even though it looks terrible, it's actually great because it's the only remain of the heavy industry that once made this town a true industrial town and ruined any possibility for tourism, which preserved it in a way. because there are no summer houses in Bakar. It's a medieval town that is preserved in its original shape because there were no tourists. So once they remove this last piece of industry, it's going to be a true undiscovered gem. And the starfish, for something that was so poisoned with industry, it's a true sign of hope. It means that life is coming back to this part of the coast, which it was an impossible to see sight up until a few years ago. So when you see the residents, when people of Bakar spot this, they are actually smiling and happy. They are calling, "Oh, look, there's a starfish." It's going to be a true joy when they see it. And this is not really a sunset. It's the sunrise, because Bakar is turned in such a direction that they say that it has the most beautiful sunrise in the whole country. Okay, so imagine connecting these stories. Couldn't be this, if we connect it into a single story, couldn't this be a story about man and nature? Maybe a story about rebirth of the city. And once you start using these stronger themes and put it together into a single story that is connected, doesn't it already start feeling a bit more powerful and meaningful? Could you maybe understand that once we start using these connections, we are still telling the truth, everything is the same, but once you start connecting it into a single story, once you start explaining what it means for the locals, for the community, so yes, this was bad. This is also remain of bad times. But look, technology here and here and here could form a similar story. Science with the measures and the measures of earthquakes, it could also help. The power of nature here, the messages of sustainability with the traditional fishing that was destroyed by modern fishing. There are so many messages to be transmitted here that will make the person who came there appreciate the destination more than if they just walk with no interpretation at all, when they will see nothing but an old, abandoned, modest town that's not so interesting, which is a really fair, and I really like this sentence. Sorry, Christinka, for quoting this. But that's the truth. If we don't know nothing about it, and even if we know too much but don't really know the meaning behind it, we will not appreciate it. And now imagine turning all this into a product, into an exhibition, into like they are now building a tuna park where they are going to tell more about this history of traditional fishing. They are trying to turn this tunnel into a walkway. So they are now trying to put it into a different use. Okay, I hope that I kind of managed to explain what's this deeper meaning and higher truth behind interpretation. So I'm just going to go back to theme for a second, because it's not something that we can work on in just 2 hours, but it's good that I mention it because I'm sure that you could sometimes come across it again. And I have a great example that could help you understand what a theme is. Like, I don't know if you had this question asked when you were in school, when you were learning your national language and literature. And here in Croatia, they always asked us, what did the poet want to say? Have you ever heard that question? Yes? What did the writer want to say? And then you had to kind of guess what, or maybe understand what did he want to say. But this is actually great. because once you start thinking about it, what they did to us, they wanted us to give the right answer. But actually, there's maybe not. Oh, thank you, Desislava. See, it's the same thing. They used to do it to us and to you too. I sometimes know that I understood the poem completely different, but instead I just guessed what does my teacher want me to write, because there was this consensus that there is one single explanation. But if you put people in a single group, to work in groups, you are going to see that people actually understand in a discussion, that they understand the poetry differently, the literature overall. They don't really pick up the same sentence. But you could try think about the theme in that way. Interpreter, even if it's a person or if it's a group of people working on a similar project, if they could define a theme, this single powerful sentence that they will use as a guideline, and that already has something powerful within, is going to help them in creation. So there is one example that actually works really good. Do you remember when the man landed on the moon? There was one sentence that the whole world remembered. And please let's just not discuss about whether this is true or not, the moon landing. But there was one sentence. I did he out there, I knew it. Well, but there is this one sentence that was in all of our minds. It's what was it? It was a small step for a man, but a big step for humanity. And this sentence, even now when we say it and we hear it, we still sometimes get goosebumps, right? You can feel it in your bones. It's just a powerful sentence, and it is true. But in this short sentence, you can understand that there was so much going on. There's a process behind it. It's not just a step. It's something else. It has a bigger meaning. It's power in that sentence. So you can maybe dispute whether the man landed on moon, but you can dispute the power of that sentence. So something like that, something powerful, strong, with a deeper meaning, something that we can all that gives us a revelation, is a good theme. So again, themes are something that is kind of abstract, but luckily enough, there are many easy to learn tricks that you can start using right away. And I'm sure that a lot of you are using this even now in their work. And these are some of the easy to learn tricks. Point to the uniqueness of the heritage that you're presenting. Why is this unique? Why is this special? What makes it one of the kind? Hands-on. So hands-on, it means learn through experience. Make people experience, feel, try what they do. Demonstrate, give examples. So hands-on learning is actually something that is being rated by UNESCO as well. In fact, heritage interpretation as an educational tool, it goes perfectly with UNESCO's guidelines of learning for sustainable development. Oh, look at this, engage all senses. Now, this is something that is so self-explanatory, so simple, but we often forget about it in the actual exhibitions, workshops. Okay, in workshops, at least you can touch things. Different presentations, how to exchange all senses. Really think about the ways how you can make people listen to little details, touch, feel, So really, this is very efficient. It is proven in so many researches that the more senses are engaged, the more memories are created. Change position. Now, this is so simple and seems so trivial, but I would highly encourage you to try this thing if you're, for example, guiding a group of visitors and trying to explain anything to them. A simple change of position changes the dynamics. If someone fell asleep while you were talking, they are going to wake up immediately, ask questions. They don't want to miss something. Where was I? And they are going to focus straight back in. And you can do that also with interpretive panels by asking people to turn around to find something similar in the, I don't know, exhibition area. You can do that too. Change perspective. Like, remember that frog from a pond that I mentioned earlier. Now, if you're talking about the frog, why not start talking from the frog's point of view? Or go back through time. Imagine if we were here 1,000 years ago and then start explaining how would things look like. So these little words like imagine, going back to time, imagining we are somebody else, we are looking from a different position, from a different time, that's another very powerful and simple tool. Other literary figures as well. Compare, humanize, give human characteristics to the things that you are describing. All of this works perfectly. Just a simple switch. If saying that this room has witnessed so many historical meetings. The room hasn't witnessed anything. The room is not alive. But if you use the word that brings it to life, automatically we think about it in a different way. It's just natural in the brain. So this such a simple change of a sentence will actually be very, very, very successful in connecting people with what you're describing. And this is another thing that everyone who works with visitors or participants, whatever you want to call them, right now, I'm not going to be that strict about this. But this thing is something that people are usually very uncomfortable with. But again, I suggested to try it out if you haven't yet and see how it works. And that's open-ended questions. Now, these are questions that don't have the right answer. There's no yes or no. There's no right guess. In fact, if you ask a question and someone answers and you say, bravo, that's right, you're absolutely right, then it wasn't an open-ended question. Open-ended questions are, where do you come from? Have you ever seen something like this before? Is there anything like this where you come from? Does anyone have experience with this? So these are open-ended questions. Whatever people answer, it doesn't matter. It's just a way to build communication, to open them up. Because if you use closed questions, that will give you a feeling that there is a communication and dynamics in the group. It will give you that feeling, but it's not really going to help the whole group connect. It's going to bring forward people who know stuff and who are the loudest ones and who like to communicate and show off. But everyone else is going to go, oh no, she's asking questions. I'm going to go to the back of the group. Please don't call me out. I don't want to answer. So they are going to feel like that, and they are going to close off completely. So instead of opening communication for everyone, you are going to close it for some. Open-ended questions are meant to help people think, help them involve. Even if they don't want to answer, they are going to be thinking. I hope that that happened when I asked you about those photos. Even if you didn't want to say anything, that at least you were thinking, wait, does this remind me of something? How do I feel? I hope that that happened. And that would be an open-ended question. So it doesn't matter what you say, what the answer is. Okay. So maybe someone can translate this. I tried, but I just understood American archaeologist and Montana. So if so, please, Chayana, if there's anything that you wish to translate, feel free to interrupt me and translate. Okay. So open-ended questions. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yes. I'm glad that you had a similar experience. And I wonder how it works, because people are usually really hard to, they really don't want to go away from their content. And open-ended questions can do that. So it is kind of a skill to be able to open up questions, and at the same time keep the conversation on your topic. So it is actually rather difficult, but it's a skill worth learning, and you can try it out with small things, with really small things, just by inserting one or few questions like these and in the middle of your presentations. And by the way, this is something that you shouldn't do with children, because the children usually don't need much inspiration with opening communication. So for them, it could be better to stick with closed questions, because otherwise you just can't fulfill your educational goal and deliver your content. So that's one of the things that's different with children. But for adults, it can be really, really useful. And when you get comfortable with that, it's something that really helps people feel natural. And then they are not going to be afraid to ask their questions, which is even more important, because most certainly they have them. Like, I know that you have some questions by now, but you're not asking them. So I think that I don't really imitate an open feel enough. Please ask anything. Okay, let's continue. If there are no questions. Well, let's just, I mean, I know that you have learned a lot about community involvement so far. So I just put a few quotes here that really, really emphasize the importance of community involvement in heritage preservation or safeguarding. I also am aware that you know the difference by now, that we are not really aiming to preserve the heritage in this one moment in time. We are trying to help it live on through communities. It is really difficult with living heritage, but I'm not going to go into that right now, because I know you've had and you are also going to have a lot of lectures by professionals in the field of living heritage precisely. Let's stick to heritage interpretation and some practical aspects. But I think that this is always a good place to find inspiration. The UNESCO's Register of Good Safeguarding Practices You will then make sure that all of these examples are community-based, all of them really. If the community is not involved, and if there are no visitors on the other side who will help it, give the community reason to keep the heritage alive, it's not going to enter in this register. I'm sure that some of you are already aware that this register is not something that gets filled up every year with dozens of examples. In fact, only a few good examples per year, or sometimes even less, are added to this list, which just proves how hard it is and how much work it takes to create something like this. Just last week, you had a lecture by Tamara Nikolic-Đerić, who is considered to be one of the greatest experts in Croatia in this field. And she was the person behind getting an eco museum from Croatia into this register, which is a huge success. It's still the only example like that from Croatia. It's the Eco Museum Batana, dedicated to a boat, and the traditions, of course, around it. So this is something that we can all aim for, but it's hard and long process. But any project, as I said at the beginning, even a small one, can involve community in a certain way. So when we are thinking about community, then these are some of the questions that we should ask. Who makes the community? What matters to the community? What does it want? And what does it not want? Which is also an important question. I will give you just an example. There was a festival in a small town of Vrsar. There was a festival dedicated to Casanova that tried to remember this part of history when Casanova came to this town. And really, there are some fun historical examples. But people, the community, people who lived there, they hated that really so much that the organizers decided to change this into a walking tour, which is much less invasive, but it actually has better ways to educate people about this event and find some deeper meanings. Since the festival really, it turned into some kind of a semi-erotic festival, and that's what the community didn't want to be a part of. But this tour was something that they accepted, and it's a way how you can adjust to the community needs and wants. Or in my hometown, we have a botanical garden, and when it was founded in the 19th century, the deal was made that it would be free for the citizens forever. And then last year, they started charging tickets, and it was €1.50, approximately, even less. But we were so furious because they broke an agreement made more than 100 years ago. We were furious. People stopped coming. That's what the community didn't want. And we were really, really angry. I don't know if you can understand that. It seems funny. It's just a small price to pay. But we felt it in our hearts that it was really something that was closing off the local community. So it's important to ask, what do they not want? Then clear communication and trust is something that's usually very difficult for the organizers to achieve, because usually there's someone who runs the project, and they think they know best, and they don't really leave the dialogue open enough. it feels like they do, but people don't really dare to suggest ideas, and it usually ends like that one person thinks that they are the only ones who are working for that cause. Well, maybe it's because that cause is only important to that one person, and because everyone felt supportive when they, explained the ideas in the first place, that person wasn't really aware that the communication wasn't open enough and that it didn't get enough contributions from the community. It can be one of the ideas. And then the most difficult part is to set up the community management, some kind of a way to manage this project or an association or whatever it is, and decision making. So who makes the decision, who has the responsibility? But these first questions are something that's really worth asking when you're thinking about communities. And then if it doesn't work, when you reach out to communities, maybe you are trying to invite them, maybe you are organizing free workshops and free exhibitions for the locals, but they are just not there, they are not coming, then there's another way, and that's to step out to the community, to the streets. And I chose these two projects from local, well, this was a gallery, but it's now turned into a museum. And this is also a museum, archaeological and natural history museum work together. So this first project is actually present all over the world. Julian De Casabianca is a French artist, I think he's French. And his project outings are usually supported by local museums where he paints giant murals of paintings that are a part of these museums on the streets of the city. So it's a big, actually collaborative project. There's an artist involved. There's usually some museum whose collection it is. And then usually the city authorities also help out. And then this project is Zagreb before it was. Now Zagreb is my hometown. And I really love this project because I think it's something that it's today that we're talking about actions like these. These two museums actually exhibited pieces or replicas of pieces that were found on certain locations in the town, on the actual spots they were found. And it's really a great quest. It first of all raises the importance of the exhibits that our museums contain. The museums are stepping out to the streets, to the public. If the public doesn't come to them, then they are coming to the public. Just pointing, listen, this is what we found and we have it in our collection. And they are pointing to all, it's like a collection of crazy findings. This particular thing is from Roman times. And this is a nice piece to put up here just before Valentine's, because it's a monument to a wife that was rarely found. That's what it says. So we like to think that it means that it was a good wife, not a bad wife, not a bad case of a rarely found wife. So it's kind of romantic, a romantic monument from Roman times. And then there are some, replicas of mammoth bones, even a whale that was found in nowadays Zagreb when this was the Great Pannonian Sea. So you can imagine that people really learn something and it strikes them when they pass by such a monument. When they see a monument of a giant fish, it looks like a giant fish, but they realize that whales were swimming here 10 millions of years ago. It's really, really revelating. So very simple, but they actually stepped out to community through this project. I like that. Museums finding a way to step out. And let's see some simple, inspiring examples of living heritage. Now, the tradition of making these lititar hearts also something that's part of UNESCO's intangible heritage. And this is a producer, Lititar Sturic is the name. And they are following this old tradition, and because of people like these, there are not that many, they create this little souvenir in the end. The tradition is being kept alive. So what I'm trying to say with this example, this is a whole story. They have a workshop that you can enter, see, and see how the things are done. They have this room in the bottom right corner where they can organize workshops for people, for visitors. They have a store where they sell the literature. And they are the living history themselves, the family that follows the tradition that has been in the region for generations and so on. Sometimes I've noticed that museums, when they are presenting these things, they sometimes forget to see if is there any way to include the living pieces. They have an old Lititar heart, and they say, this one is from the 17th century. It's the oldest piece that we have preserved, and they have it exhibited. But there's no way for the visitor to even become aware that this still exists, and that there are ways to maybe connect with actual people who still work in a similar manner. They still follow the traditional recipes, and there's no other way to preserve it if there's no interest by the visitors and eventually some buyer, because thanks to the recognition to this tradition, the traditional craftsmen have the reason to follow it. They wouldn't have the reason to follow it if there's no one who wants to buy a souvenir. So it's nice to see when sometimes museums actually connect with these producers, and they invite them to organize workshops in their spaces, or there's a little exchange, different kinds of the exchanges between the producers and the museums. I really like when I see that. This is also a festival of living heritage of folk tales and legends of a small region in Croatia, and it's governed by a museum, Museum of Tsuroi. So that's the museum of that region. The region is called Tsuroi, and each year it has a topic, a certain mythical creature that they revive through legends, through artists, through different programs. It's incredibly successful, and there are so many side effects of this festival. And I really like it because there's another similar festival in Croatia, but I chose this one because it's governed by a museum, which actually gave it more financial liberty. You won't believe that, of course. But a private company will never be able to get so many funds. And the museum was really successful in getting funds from the county, from the city, from the nearby city where it's placed, from some other available funds. And it proves that with the good management, the museums can really, really organize quality events. And with that, they are giving work to so many artists and so many other funny creatures. See, that's me here between these funny creatures, also always a part of the program. But that's nice. I think it can be a nice piece of inspiration how it can be done. Then living history, both in digital form, like here, where they are reviving an old historical tale about witch Mare, a woman who was accused of witchcraft. At the same time, they are reviving local legends in the region of Istria in Croatia. through digital, augmented reality, virtual reality, and so on, or the living history in its most common form, when living people are acting as historical characters in historical settings. Do you have similar examples? Do you maybe have any experience in your places? If you do, please write it down in the chat. I think it would be interesting for everyone to share. Or have you ever witnessed a good example of living history? This can be a great place to show old crafts, maybe forgotten crafts that are not used anymore. Oh, sorry, this Perunfest by Museum of Turopolje, obviously it shouldn't be here anymore. It was just, it just stuck here. So sorry, this is not from that. But this is a set of quick ideas. What could you do to make living heritage maybe closer, to bring it closer to people, and that maybe is not right now in the focus of your institution? Okay, workshops are probably the most logical thing when you talk about some customs, traditions, storytelling events, maybe to preserve some old lore, publishing. Maybe some of you have some examples of publishing ideas, publishing like illustrated books, some kind of brochures. Live interpretation again, this is something really popular and very, very engaging. Gamification, that's one of my areas of expertise. Right here on the photo, you can see an event where we revived a story about a blind water carrier in the town of Bakar, and it was through a gamified activity. It was really amazing because we took a light approach, gamification, but we still managed to express a really meaningful message, and it's a rather difficult topic, but it was a message of inclusiveness, and I felt it was really successful and educational, but such a light approach through a game. And content creation in different ways. These are some quick ideas when it comes to content creation. Again, publishing. This is something that saved me in the COVID years when there were no visitors. I started publishing ebooks for my future visitors, maybe to keep the connection alive. And I always believe in content as a first connection with future visitors and the previous ones. Then Instagram accounts with a twist, like maybe choosing some kind of a historical personality or a craftsman who can help you share, storyteller who can help you learn more about a certain tradition. TikTok, is any one of you on TikTok? Any museums? Because there are more and more really cool accounts. Oh, someone is, great. Workshop games, publishing Facebook pages, of course. So, well, I would still highly encourage you to get crazy and on TikTok, because it's really a rising network, and more serious people are on TikTok. And also my logic is that even if it was just for 12 years old, that those 12 years old will become adults in a few years. So this is a good place to start, a good time to start. And when they when they become cultural tourists, they might as well come to us, right? No, really, there are so many great accounts. Many big museums are on TikTok. Many experts, museologists, many I don't know, experts in different fields, and they really can help us all learn how to communicate quick and fast and interesting with the guests. Okay, blog, that's something that that takes also a lot of engagement, but it can be a great way to turn traffic to our website. A podcast, if you don't like your face to be seen, you can do it in audio format, and then maybe this could be something that you can easily turn into audio tours as well. And interactive quests, gamified activities, treasure hunts, those are all, well, things that maybe with most of the institutions will have enough capacity, at least in human resources, that I know that a lot of creative people work in such institutions. But okay, I know also that they have a lot of work even without that. But these are just ideas of how to bring heritage even closer. Okay, so remember, just a little wrap up. This is the key diagram for heritage interpretation that shows us what are the main roles of interpreter, these aces of interpretation, that shows us the triangle of interpretation, the communication triangle that goes each and every way, that is connected with a deeper meaning, the so-called theme. That's the abstract part again. And to get back to my Licitar hearts that are really a part of my own region, so I'm especially fond of it. And I also give one of these to every one of my tourists. So see, it starts with some kind of a shape, then you have to make a dough. It's just a simple cookie, nothing else. It's really, I can't even understand why do these people still work. They need 3 weeks to produce these cookies. 3 weeks it takes from it to become, to start from here and get the real final heart. But if the whole destinations are supporting it, if the community supports it, like in this town of Marija Bistrica, where you can see that this is one of the symbols of the town, a photo frame is designed in the shape of these hearts. So the whole community still supports it, they identify with it, and everyone who comes to this town will understand that this is something that's worth taking home with you. And if they start asking questions, it's going to be more than just a souvenir, more than just an euro worth cookie, even less. This costs 5 kuna, which is less than a euro. So as you can imagine, this is not the true worth. And to answer the question, sorry, she sent me a direct message. See, this whole wreath full of licitars who don't necessarily need to be in the shape of a heart is a wreath that is where the tradition of the whole region is interwoven in these beautiful little hearts. There's still someone who makes them, but it's up to all of us to keep them alive. The tour guides, the museums, the cultural experts, the visitors, the participants, everyone actually has the responsibility to keep it alive. And as I told you, it's part of UNESCO's intangible heritage list. So obviously there's something more valuable in it than it's just being a 5 kunas cookie. So I hope that this little presentation was maybe more light-hearted than the ones that you've seen so far, that it was a bit of a break maybe as well, but that it also stirred some questions and that there are going to be some things left unanswered and for you to explore even more. And hopefully you got some ideas on how to connect with the possible participants even more.